Good morning, friends. So this is a very interesting and important subject today, the laws of prosperity. You know, some people may have this lingering doubt that if you're seeking spiritual truth, then prosperity you should be indifferent to it. But that's far from true. What is much more true is that you should be as prosperous as possible, but completely unattached to your own wealth, so that you can use what you have in helping other people. Yogananda, who is our guru, his two most advanced disciples were multi-millionaires. One was so rich, in fact, that he had his own private golf course in a town in America, in Kansas City. He founded one of the largest insurance companies in all of the U.S. and accumulated a lot of wealth, but he used that wealth to help others and became, in fact, enlightened very quickly, because the same energy that we put into becoming prosperous, to achieving wealth, to achieving anything in life, is the same energy that ultimately we will put in to achieving the wealth of the great wealth of knowing our own self and of being aware of our unity with God, who of course owns everything in creation. So our Father, Mother, God has everything, and if we call on their power, we too can achieve that. But ultimately, we should, even with achievement, we should become less and less attached to things. There's a wonderful story, true story, of when Alexander the Great, who had conquered all of Greece first and then Persia, and he was conquering across the known world. Finally, he came to India, and he was beginning to conquer the lands in India, the various kingdoms. And at some point, he heard that there was a great yogi, a great wise man. Now, Alexander was always interested in wisdom as well as other things. So he thought, well, I must talk to this person. So he sent his counselor to bring this yogi back to him so he could talk to him. And the counselor came and found the yogi sitting in lotus posture under a tree with just a dhoti on. And he made him an offer. He said, Alexander the Great wants... Let's see if we can keep the sound of Om from booming from time to time.
They
okay.
Can't hear you at the back,
I see. They can't hear. Can you not hear in the back? Not very clearly. Oh, well, I'll get very close to the microphone then. So Alexander's counselor came to this yogi, and he said, Alexander the Great, the conqueror of all the world, wants your presence in front of him, and he has told me that if you will come, he will offer you great wealth, and if you refuse, I am to cut off your head. And the yogi said, if Alexander wants to talk to me, let him come here. I'm happy to talk with him, and you go tell him I have no more use for his wealth than I have for my head. If he wants either one, let him take them. Well, the counselor, of course, was a little befuddled by this, went back and reported this to Alexander. And so Alexander, being very intrigued by this, came to speak in person to the yogi. And he introduced himself. I'm Alexander the Great. I am the conqueror of all the world. I have in my possession all of the known countries, and I would like to speak with you. And the yogi looked and he said, I don't think your feet cover any more of the earth than my feet do. What do you mean that you are the possessor of everything? And Alexander, of course, was a little intrigued. And he said, well, I'll offer you great riches. What would you like from me? And the yogi said, could you move about a foot to the right? You're blocking the sun, which I like. And that was his request. Well, in fact, Alexander brought this yogi back to Greece with him and was instructed by him. Alexander, as you might know, had a relatively short life, so he died on the way back to Greece. Nonetheless, it's illustrative of the fact that material possessions are very, very helpful. They're helpful to work in the world. They're helpful to be able to serve other people. But the greatest possession of all is to possess your own mind and your own desires and your own needs. But let's first talk about the laws of prosperity as they apply on this world. There are many, many hidden laws that we have a sense that they exist, but they haven't become obvious. They haven't become clear in our minds. Now, we could say that we understand the law of gravity because we have mathematical formulas that illustrate that and can predict the strength of it and so on. But for basically most of known history up until the time of Newton, that understanding wasn't there. Everybody knew that an apple fell from the tree onto the earth, but nobody knew what caused it to do that. Gradually we're uncovering hidden laws. Well, there are hidden laws of spirituality and there are hidden laws of prosperity that are just as universal and just as powerful as the law of gravity is. And so I want to talk basically about 4 of those elements this morning, and then I want to end by talking about what real success is. So the 4 that I'm going to talk about, there are a number of ways that one can approach this subject, but I want to make it simple enough so that we can see these laws, these hidden laws in practice and the power of them in our lives. So the first law of prosperity is the law of willpower. Willpower is, Yogananda, when we'll slip into calling him master. So whenever you hear the term master, that is our name for Paramahansa Yogananda. So master said that the greatest tool that we have is the tool of willpower. And he said that there are 2 kinds of willpower. There is automatic willpower, or unconscious willpower, and there's dynamic willpower. What's the difference? I just saw somebody move their head. You probably weren't aware that you moved your head, and yet something in your mind wanted to move your head, and you sent energy to the muscles in order to move. Well, that sending energy, having a desire, having a purpose or an aspiration, and then energizing it and sending energy through that aspiration is willpower. And so most of the time, willpower functions. It's always functioning in us, but most of the time it's functioning on an unconscious level. We couldn't breathe without it. We couldn't walk without it. We couldn't think without it. We couldn't pick up a pencil. We couldn't read a book. Nothing that we do can be done without that combination of intention and then energy. So that Swami Kriyananda has a song that talks about the cowardice of a dreamer. He just sits there and he has these beautiful dreams and beautiful fantasies, but he doesn't have the courage yet to put energy to make his dreams and his fantasies manifest in this world. So the dynamic willpower that we have to develop is the ability that when we desire something, in this case, let's call it prosperity, that when we desire something, we put the energy into that aspiration and we continue to put that energy in, and that energy literally can become infinite because we are connected to an infinite source of power. We're connected to God's consciousness. We're connected to an ocean of energy in a subtle form called prana, and the more that we energize or put our willpower, our intention into achieving our goals, the more we draw on that power of the universe, which is innately spiritual. Does God want us to become successful? Does God want us to become prosperous? Of course He does. He created success. He created prosperity. And He wants us to use these subtle laws because He knows that as we use these subtle laws in whatever way, we get more and more in touch, in this case, with His ocean of energy. And as that energy flows through us, it too has its own intelligence, and we will become more and more powerful. Now, how powerful can this intention be? Yogananda gave us one of the laws of prosperity. He said, the greater the will, the greater the flow of energy. So the more powerful the intention is, the more powerful will be a flow of energy helping us to accomplish that intention. Swami Kriyananda had a brother monk who was a mountain climber. He came from Switzerland, and he climbed the mountains in the Alps, and he was extremely good at this, and he made many first ascents. So he was climbing up one of the peaks, and he was climbing up a route in that mountain that had never ever been climbed before. No one had accomplished it. And so he got up maybe about 4/5 of the way, and then he found out, with a very difficult climb, he found out why no one had accomplished it. Because as he got there, there was a ledge, and then the mountain came up from that ledge, and it went out in this way over space before it came back up, and no one could figure out how to make that movement upside down and to get over that lip. So this man, it was so difficult to get up that it would have been impossible to climb that same route back down. And he thought, well, I'm stuck. I can either give up and I can sit here until I starve to death, or I can try. And so he tried, and he got upside down, and he fell. And he tried again, and he fell. And he tried again, and he fell. He tried 25 times, refusing. See, that's his intention, was to get over that lip, to get to the top of the mountain, and to save his life. And he refused to allow any thoughts of negativity or any thoughts of I can't or the impossible to stop him from at least trying. After the 25th time, he said, as he got upside down, he felt an actual force holding him to the mountain. And he climbed out in over space. That same force was holding him. Then he got over the lip. And then from there it was an easy ascent up and a fairly easy ascent down the other side of the mountain. But see, the principle here is that we think that we have a limitation of the amount of energy that can flow through us. And that's true, but that limitation is only because we are not ready or not willing to channel. Thank you, Aditya. We're not willing yet to channel the amount of energy that can flow through us. But literally, that energy can become infinite. Yogananda said that great yogis have the power to create a whole galaxy out of their consciousness. Now that's, if they don't, I suppose, very often have need to do that kind of thing. But nonetheless, they have the power to do it. So that first law of success is that the greater our willingness, the greater the flow of energy. So how do we develop willingness if we don't have it? Well, the first thing is that we have to rid our minds of the thought that we can't, and I'll come to that. But Yogananda gave a very simple technique for developing your willpower. All of us face certain challenges, but he said, pick a challenge of doing something that is within your power, but a little bit difficult, and then accomplish that. Do not, under any condition, allow yourself to say, I can't, and give up. Because it's at the edge, let's call it, of your envelope of ability to allow that energy to flow, naturally as you get to that edge, what's stopping you from going beyond that? What's stopping you is the thoughts of your mind of I can't. So he said, pick something that you know you can, so you don't get that negative principle in operation, and then accomplish it. And that will strengthen your willpower. And if you continue to do that, you begin to get a power of energy that's flowing within you that will be able to channel whatever you want and be able to accomplish it. So that's the first law. The next law, well, I'll tell you the 4 laws that I'm going to talk about, so you don't have to wonder what is he going to talk about next. The 4 laws are willpower, focusing or concentrating your power, intensity of energy, and finally endurance or continuation. So those 4 are the way that we're going to, those are the laws of prosperity. So we've talked about getting this energy flow going, but the next thing that we have to do is we have to focus the energy that flows through us. 2 of the richest people in the world are Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, and they're good friends. And Warren Buffett told this story. One time he was having dinner at the home of Bill Gates, and Bill Gates' father was there, and he said, you're 2 of the most successful people in the world. I'm going to ask you to do something. I want you to write down in one single word the secret of what has allowed you to become successful. And so they thought about it a little bit, and they wrote down on a piece of paper, each of them wrote down one word. And that one word was exactly the same for both of them: focus. And the focus of their life, their intention, was narrowed down because they can't accomplish everything. Warren Buffett gave this exercise, and it'd be a good exercise for you. Write down on a piece of paper everything that you would like to accomplish in life. And let's say that you have 30 things that you would like to accomplish in life. He said, pick 5 that you are really completely committed to accomplish, and write those and put them on a piece of paper saying my commitments. And then on the other piece of paper, which now has 25 remaining goals in your life, label that 25 ways that I will fail in achieving what I'm after. Because if we spread our energy all over, we can't accomplish anything. That's why Shurjo said it jokingly, but it's true that if you can't accomplish the focus of turning your mobile off, how are you going to accomplish the ability to focus your mind in achieving, let's say, a new idea for your business, or a new way of doing something, or finish a task that requires concentration? You know, we cannot multitask. There's no such thing as multitasking. We serially switch from one point to the next. And that inability to focus our mind, it's astounding. IBM does a test every year in which they look at the ability for people to continue to focus. So They have some methodology. I think they have on the screen something that you're supposed to follow with your eyes and keep your attention on it. For the last 10 years, that has been going, the amount of time has been going down and down and down and down. And at this point, it is something like 7 seconds on average is how long someone can concentrate. You want to hear something really astounding? A goldfish can concentrate for longer than that. So, multitasking is going to ruin your ability to achieve your goals. So and the habit of multitasking is just that, it's a habit. So don't do that. But I don't want to talk about the negative side of it. I want to talk about the positive side of focusing your mind. The very best thing to learn how to focus your mind is to learn how to meditate. And we teach that. Many of you in the room already have a habit of meditation. But meditation allows, or in fact the very definition of meditation is deep concentration. Yogananda defined meditation as deep concentration on God or on one of His qualities. And so there are many techniques of meditation, but all the techniques of meditation help us focus our mind, and many of our techniques help us do that not by just looking at the mind, but by working with the underlying energy or prana. And so we have many techniques. Those of you who know a little about yoga know of the term pranayama. Usually it refers to breathing techniques, but the deeper meaning is to be able to control the energy, and the mind, the breath, and the energy or prana are linked together. And so meditation, by teaching you to control that prana and work with the breath, will teach you also to be able to concentrate the mind. So focus is the difference between, if you want to send a light to the moon, no matter how strong your searchlight is, it is not going to reach the moon. But if you can completely focus that light, which a laser does, you can have a laser the size of this microphone that will send a beam of light to the moon. And a sensitive enough telescope can perceive that light. And so focusing your mind, focusing the energy, is the next law of success. The law of success after that is intensity. You could have a laser, but if it was so weak, it wouldn't be able to send that beam to the moon. So you have to have intensity. Now, intensity means to be able to increase the power of that awakened will. The flow of energy from will has to start, it has to be focused, and now it has to become powerful. And there are two things especially that we need to do in order to increase the power of that. The first is we have to increase the power of our positive expectations. The power of the positive mind is, again, like willpower, unlimited. And Yogananda said that from past lives, we have many, in this life and in past lives, we have many experiences of success and failure. And so we have trained our minds to, one way or the other, that balance is on one side or the other. A person who is unsuccessful because they have trained themselves to think that they cannot accomplish what they're trying to do. A person who is successful has trained themselves to think that they can accomplish what they want to do. Now, Yogananda said that actually all of these past thoughts, these past experiences, he talked about it as if they're soldiers. He often used the terminology that thought is like a mental citizen. Our mind is like a kingdom, and our thoughts, each thought is like a citizen in that kingdom. And he said, so there are positive soldiers and there are negative soldiers. As we think positively, it brings forward those positive soldiers of success thoughts from past lives. And so it isn't just the willpower, it's combining willpower with that positive mindset that refuses to be told that you cannot accomplish something. And we can again train this. Even your body posture will train that. Did you ever see somebody saying, I'm strong, I am willing, I can accomplish anything, and looking like that? Or, I'm such a weakling, I don't think I can do anything. There's a study done with something called the Wonder Woman effect. And I don't know if you know, there's a cartoon character called Wonder Woman. And her posture is like this, with her hands on her hips and her chin up and a fiery look in her eyes and looking like that. Well, somebody said, let's test this, see if it's helpful. So they took a group of people who were applying for a job. So it was a job interview. And most of them they left alone. They took a few young women and they took them into a separate room and they told them to stand in this posture for 2 minutes before their job interview. That group was 3 times more successful in the job interview than the people who were basically looking at their cell phones. And what the position does that get you in? You're slumped down, you're slumped over, your spine is straight, there's no energy flowing, you're passive. So if you want to accomplish something, think of yourself as the Wonder Woman and get that positive energy flowing that nothing can stop you. So we have these positive soldiers from the past, we have negative soldiers, negative thought citizens from the past. So you have to energize the positive and refuse to listen to thoughts that come of you can't do it. It's too hard. Oh, fear of failure. Oh, you're too shy to try something like that. Everything that says that you cannot do it will block you from doing it. And Yogananda said that God will never send a thought to you that says you cannot do it or you will fail. And so if somebody is telling you this, and many parents constantly reinforce negativity in their children, perhaps it's happened to you. If somebody is doing that, you are blocking that child, your child, from the ability to succeed in life. And so it's a very, very important thing with children, with spouses, with friends, to reinforce positive. And it's most important to reinforce the positive energy in your own consciousness, because that's the 3rd law of success. Then the 4th law of success is duration of effort. If you try to accomplish something and then it's hard, naturally it's going to be hard. Everything worthwhile in your life is going to be difficult to accomplish. If it isn't, then you're not going to grow as an individual. So you should take on challenges that are difficult and then stay with them until you succeed. Shurjo was saying that we accomplished just our 50th anniversary of the existence of Ananda. Ananda has spiritual communities where we live together all over the world, in Europe, in America. It's starting now in India. But spiritual communities are a new lifestyle by and large. And anything new is going to face challenges. When we started, people Many people told us you can't succeed. People have tried this in the past. They've failed. What makes you think that you're not going to fail? Well, Swami Kriyananda had enormous willpower and enormous positivity, and he refused to allow that thought to come in, and therefore he magnetized the rest of us in refusing. We have had many, many setbacks over the years, but we have never allowed any setback to stop us from trying to accomplish our goal. Whether you succeed in accomplishing it is secondary. The fact that you refuse to be told that you cannot accomplish it. Yogananda said in terms of health that if you have an illness, never admit that the soul, is ill. He said, because if you think of yourself as a sick person, you will incarnate with that consciousness. Think of yourself as a well person, even if that illness leads to your death. And in the next life, you will incarnate with the consciousness of being well. Otherwise, you'll incarnate with the consciousness of being ill. And I'll just end with two more things. So this positive flow of energy, an enduring sense of energy, Yogananda gave a technique. He said, in meditation, get the will center is here at the point between the eyebrows. He said, get that flow of energy. It can be as peace, it can be as joy, it can be any strong, positive flow of energy. Concentrate it there, and then allow that to go throughout the brain and hold it there. So let's take light, which is one aspect of God. So you look for light in the spiritual eye here, and you allow that light to spread into the brain, and you hold it there. He said that will obliterate, if you can hold it there, it will obliterate the darkness, which includes negative thinking, negative self-perception, fears, reluctance, all of the things that hold you back. So that light will heal you, and it will also heal others. So let me just end by reiterating that these laws of prosperity, if used, if you actually allow these things to come into your life, they will create prosperity, although you have past karma that may block that. Yogananda had a student who he took a job, and not only did he lose his job, but the company that he was with went bankrupt. He took another job, the same thing happened. He took a third job, and the same thing happened. 3 companies went bankrupt, and he came to his guru and he said, I must be some sort of a negative influence. Just being around me, these companies fail. And Yogananda said, no, you're not. You have failure consciousness from a past life, and therefore you are attracted to companies that are about to fail. He said, you have to overcome your failure consciousness. Told him to take another job. He failed. The company went bankrupt. He came to Yogananda and he said, it didn't seem to work. Master said, now the karma is done. Instructed him to start his own entrepreneurial company. He became a great success, a multimillionaire. So these past karmic periods are there, but if we persist and if we stay with our intention, we will burn out that negative karma, and we will create positive good karma that will allow prosperity. So as I said at the beginning, God wants us to be prosperous, but real success is not being prosperous. Real success is not being rich or being wealthy, being famous, or being any of the things that people typically desire. Real success is having those things and not even caring about them, because you're unattached, or not having them, as Kalyana, the yogi, was unattached to his own head. Said, take it if you want. I don't need it. I'm not my body. Go ahead and take it. So to have a body and be unattached to it is good. To have wealth, to be unattached to it is good, because both of those are tools by which we can express something in life. But real success is to realize that we're not going to be happy by anything outside of our own consciousness. And that's what the purpose of the spiritual path is to bring us into contact finally with our true self, which is the soul and which is an expression of God, who is the wealthiest, most prosperous, most successful character in the universe.
Shirjo just said to me, try to be as loud as possible. So I don't know what that means exactly. But I was amused when he was introducing us earlier, when he said, Jyotish and Devi have an overabundance of joy. And I thought, how do you have an overabundance of joy? Well, I also want to welcome you and thank you for coming this morning. It's wonderful to see so many of you here. We also have a group of friends who drove up this morning from our Pune ashram, and they're with us, and of course the monks from Lonavala. So it's like a family reunion. And I will try to be not only as loud as possible, but as convincing as possible with my overabundance of joy. Okay, so we'll have a little change of pace here. Jyotish was speaking very much, okay, I'm going to be a little bit personal. We will be celebrating soon our 45th wedding anniversary. Most of that time we've been teaching together throughout the world, Europe, America, India. And I have to say, it is just delightful, because we never know what the other person's going to say. And I'm usually second. And so I have to, okay, he covered that topic. Okay, now I have to edit that out. But I was so pleased because he didn't take any of my stories this morning. So rest assured you won't be hearing a repetition.
She can't even think of a joke or a story because we're in tune enough that I'll pick it up and tell it before she can.
It's true, it's true. So what I'd like to start with is some stories about what is true prosperity. Jyotish has been speaking of it, but I'd like to share some stories because they penetrate the consciousness more than just thoughts. So the first story is about our Lord Krishna and Narada, and they are roaming the countryside. And they come and they see a beggar by the wayside. And he said, oh, please, sirs, my wife is ill, my children are starving. Please, can you give me some money? And Narada looks at Krishna, and Krishna just looks the other way, totally ignores the beggar. And Narada's a little surprised by this, but he has a pouch of gold coins, and he gives it to the man. And the man said, oh, thank you, sir, thank you. And Krishna just looks off, no response. And then they continue on their way. Narada's thinking about this, what's going on here? And then the next day they're roaming, and they see the same man begging, oh, please, please, sirs, my wife is ill, my children are starving, can you help me? And Narada said, well, yesterday I gave you a pouch of gold coins. What is this now? You still are without money? And he said, oh, I was so happy yesterday when you gave me those coins. I was dancing and singing, look what I have, look what I have. And a thief came and took away the pouch. And Narada thinks, oh, well, we'll try again. He doesn't have a pouch of gold coins anymore, but he has a large ruby ring. He takes that off and he gives it to the beggar. And he looks at Krishna, well, what are you going to do? Krishna just smiles and looks off. They go on their way. The next day, same story. What happened to the ruby ring? I was so happy. I was taking a boat across the river to return to my home, and I was dancing. Look what I have. Look what I have. The ring fell out of my hand, went into the river, and I have nothing again. At this time, Narada had nothing left to give him. And he looked at Krishna. Krishna reached into his pouch. He took out one pice, one little coin. And Narada was so puzzled, and he gave him the coin. They went on their way. Some time passes. They come into this village again, and there's this beggar. But this time he's dressed very nicely. He has happy children around him. And Narada said, what happened? How could you possibly have found that prosperity through that one little coin that Krishna gave you? And he said, well, when you gave me the other gifts, all I thought about was myself. When you gave me that one little coin, Krishna gave me the one little coin, I thought, what can I do with this? It's worthless. But then I passed a fishing stall, and there was a man, the fisherman, had just caught many fish laying by the side of the river, and one little fish caught my eye. It was gasping for breath. It wasn't quite dead. And I thought, I'll buy that fish and release him into the river, and at least he'll have his life. So he paid the coin, took the fish, but then he noticed that the reason the fish was gasping was the ring was caught in his throat. And so he took the ring, so happy now, gets on the boat, and he said, I have found it, I have found it. On the boat was the thief. And when he was saying, I have found it, he thought, oh my gosh, he's going to report me to the officials. I better give him back his gold coins. So by thinking of the little fish, not only what have I gotten, but how can I help others, all the riches returned to him. And when Narada heard this story, he looked at Krishna, and Krishna knew, the Lord knew, as long as the man only thought of himself, nothing would work for him. But when he took that next step and thought of others, then the riches came to him. So law of prosperity, what do you get from that? Part of prosperity is to see everyone as a part of your well-being. No one succeeds in this world, ultimately, who only thinks of themselves. Maybe for a while you will succeed. Maybe for a time you will be at the top of the pinnacle of success, but not ultimately. Because there are laws, as we've been saying, that govern the universe. And one of them is that we are all part of this same consciousness. What we give to others, we give back to ourselves. Now, another secret of true prosperity, this is from a story in my own life. Ananda, the main Ananda ashram village, is located in Northern California, in a wooded area. For those of you who follow the news, you've maybe seen that California is prone to forest fires. And we were not immune from this experience. Some years ago, we had a nice house we were living in this spiritual community. A forest fire came, and it burned the community to the ground. We lost everything we had. All we had were the clothes on our back and an 11-day-old child, our son. That's all we had. And at first, I was overwhelmed, as you can well imagine. How can I go forward in this situation? I don't even have a little blanket for this baby. What can I do? But then I went inside, and this was a grace that came, and I thought, what does a mother or a parent want to give their child? They want to give them security. They want to give them love. They want to give them a stable environment. And I thought, well, I don't have a stable environment. I don't have security, but I have my own love in my heart. Nothing can take that away. And I have my own sense of peace within myself. And when I understood that, I thought, you know, people can have the most luxurious homes in the world, but if they're devoid of a sense of peace and love, it's an empty sepulcher. But if they have a sense, and I learned this in my own life, I will give this child the peace and contentment of my own heart. And we survived the whole situation very nicely, very nicely. Everything, in fact, a few days after the fire, we were living with someone else in their home. In fact, Swami Ananda let us live in his home. And then there was a knock on the door, and it was the American Red Cross. And they said, we are here to provide relief aid for the fire victims. And we were very calm by this time, and we said, oh, well, we're the fire victims. And they said, no, 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 we mean the people who lost everything in the fire. And we said, well, we lost everything in the fire. And she wouldn't believe me, and finally she did accept it, and she said, I am here to write you an unlimited voucher. You name what you need. And so we chose a modest amount. I mean, I don't know how much they would have given us, but we were able to refurnish, and we didn't have a home, but we brought a little travel trailer that we could live in. But it was the most marvelous experience. I would not truly have traded it for anything, and I want to share this with you. When adverse things come into your life, maybe you lose your job, maybe security that you were counting on doesn't come through, maybe people betray you, any of those things, don't immediately think, oh, this is terrible. Think, what can I learn from this? How can I use this to my advantage? And that's what I did. We weren't defeated by that experience. We gained a strength from it that has lasted me for the rest of my life, because we do travel all over the world. And we're always comfortable wherever we are, because we don't expect our environment to be the source of the security around us. And another lesson we learned from that fire, the cause of the fire was a piece of county, local regional equipment that was sending out sparks along the dry grass. All of our adjacent landowners sued the county, the local government, and they received literally millions of dollars in settlement. But Ananda, I was so proud to be a part of this work. We said, we did not come here to take from others, give. We sustained the greatest loss. We wrote a letter to the local government, but don't worry, we're not going to sue you. And you know, we didn't have insurance, we had nothing, but God provided. And someday, well, maybe you will show the movie Finding Happiness. There's a beautiful documentary movie that's made about Ananda. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world, because it's based on the principle that by thinking of others, by not taking for yourself, by finding your reality within yourself, you can create anything. Now, one final story. This is a story. Oh, I thought you were saying something. This is a story true story of one of the great figures in Indian history, King Akbar the Great, who is known as the guardian of humanity, because he was so benevolent in his reign. He was always helping the underprivileged, making sure that everyone in his kingdom was taken care of and prosperous. One day, he was traveling along, and he saw two blind beggars. The first one, and people said, oh, the king is coming, the king is coming. They couldn't see, but they were told this. The first one called out in a very loud voice, just as Shurjo urged me to speak in a very loud voice. The first one said, to whom the king gives, he alone is rich. And the second beggar said, to whom God gives, he alone is rich. And the king heard this, and he was a little flattered by this. So he told his attendants, he said, go and bake a loaf of bread, but inside put gold in the bread and give it to the first beggar, who was saying, to whom the king gives. And so this was done. some weeks passed, and then Akbar the Great again passed in this area. And he saw not one beggar, but, no, not two beggars, but one. And this man was again calling out, "To whom the king gives, he alone is rich." And Akbar was puzzled, and he went to him and he said, "But I gave you that loaf of bread. It was filled with gold." And the first beggar was aghast, and he said, "Oh, I felt it, and it was so heavy that I sold it to the other beggar for 1 rupee. And he realizes that the other beggar had gone home and was prosperous. And in all humility, Akbar the Great realized the truth of what that second beggar said. To whom God gives, he alone is rich. And he said to this first beggar, you must change your motto, because what you have been saying is not based on truth. And so ultimate prosperity, and I have seen this very often in the life of myself and in others, if you try to grasp for yourself, it's like water through your fingers ultimately. But if you wait and say, God, what do you want me to have? I will take with gratefulness and humility whatever you give me. Then that's something worth having, because life ultimately is, our Guruji said, Yogananda Ji said, all life's experiences are for our entertainment and education. But then he added, but sadly, how few are either entertained or educated by them. And so look beyond the form. Look to the events in your life and say, what's the lesson I'm supposed to learn here? What can I draw the most understanding from this? And if you live your life in such a way that you're not taking for yourself, like the first beggar, that you're contented in yourself, like the people who were burnt out in the fire, and if you realize the source of everything, then you will find a prosperity that not just outward things, but you will walk through this life with a centeredness and a poise. Once we were traveling in India with Swami Kriyananda, and he was a Westerner, born in Romania, but studied with Yogananda for many years in his ashram. And we were just on an airplane. And Swamiji was dressed in Western clothes, obviously a Westerner, and the plane landed, and we were all disembarking, but Swami was moving first through the row, center aisle. And there was a man behind us. He didn't know who we were. He didn't know who Swami was. But he just tapped us on the shoulder. He could see we were together because Swami acknowledged us. And he said, who is that man? He could feel a presence there, a spiritual power born of living in attunement with God. And he said, India needs more people like that. And so it is when we travel around lecturing and sharing with people and sharing the teachings of our Guru. It is so, India is a great country, the greatest country in the world, and maybe you see all the problems and so forth, but we see the spirit underneath all of that. No other country has the depth of understanding and wisdom and understanding the purpose of life that India does. But it's time, just as we began singing that song, A New Tomorrow, it's time for a new tomorrow to come in India that blends the wisdom of the Vedas and the ancient sages with material efficiency, with prosperity, not just for a few, but for everyone, to raise up society. And the two laws, Jyotish spoke of underlying laws, there's one he didn't mention, and that's the law of magnetism. Because what we put out is what we get back. One can think of it as the law of, on a physical level, of two magnets being drawn together. But if we're putting out the consciousness of prosperity, of well-being, of the benevolence of all, we draw these back into our lives whether we expect it or not. It just comes. It's a mathematical formula. And then how do we enable ourselves to do all these things we've been talking about? Well, Jyotish mentioned the power of meditation. The power of meditation unleashes our true potential. It doesn't mean you have to go to the Himalayas and go meditate in a cave. You can do it in your workplace. You can do it in your home. You can do it on a plane. There's a wonderful children's book, Green Eggs and Ham. I don't know if you know it, by Dr. Seuss. And he talks about in a car or on a train, in a plane or on the ground, but you can meditate anywhere. And you can do it with, and why should you do it? Not to divorce yourself from the world, not to withdraw from the world, because you will find within yourself the power to do everything you want to do, to accomplish anything you want to accomplish. We were reading recently that the Harvard Business Review did a whole study, Business Review of Harvard, on the benefits of meditation in succeeding in daily life. And on a physical level, meditation helps you to lower your blood pressure. You know, life is very tense. It helps you to regulate your metabolism, lower your heart rate, improve circulation, strengthen the immune system. All these things that are compromised by living a stressful life. Meditation helps you do all these things. On an emotional level, meditation, it actually changes the structure of the brain. Scientists are doing research on this. And so, again, it's so practical. There are aspects of the brain that are more primitive, areas that deal with anxiety and fear and depression. By meditating and concentrating at the point between the eyebrows, doctors call it the prefrontal lobe, they can test this with MRIs. The energy that goes to these primitive parts of the brain is transferred to these more advanced parts of the brain that deal with decision making, problem solving, executive ability, positive thinking. These are all fruits of meditation. And then finally, the fruit of meditation at the end of the day is that you feel yourself a part of a much greater reality. So even in a practical level, instead of thinking, how am I going to get ahead in my little job? You think, how can my whole workforce get ahead? Instead of thinking, I don't like the rest of my relatives, but I'm going to have my own little happiness. You think, how can I help everyone in my friends and my family be happier? Meditation, without trying, expands who you are. And I hear someone's cell phone going off. I just have to share, once we were lecturing in Italy, and Italians are much worse at turning off cell phones, even than Indians. You can say it many times and then the cell phones go off throughout. So we were giving a lecture and the cell phones were going off, and we paused and we said, you know, we're not going to ask you to turn off your cell phones, but we do want to make you aware that we have a special program, and everyone whose phone goes off, your number is automatically given to a marketing company. And everyone started turning off their cell phones at that. So we don't have that program, I'm just teasing. But meditation is the ability to do all the things we've been talking about. Concentration, focus, willpower, endurance. And these can be applied, you know, you may not believe this, but Jyotish and I have run marathons, 26 miles, from the power of meditation. All of these things, willpower, focus, concentration. And so give yourself this gift. Learn to meditate. And we have many wonderful classes coming up in our Mumbai center. And I'm not saying this as a commercial. If you don't come to our center, learn it somewhere else. But give yourself that gift, because you will find a qualitative difference in your daily life through the practice of meditation. And others will notice it as well. And they will say, what's your secret? And you can say, my secret is I have found the power of my own self. And that's the secret of true prosperity. Thank you.
And that our progress is directional. So first we need to have attachment to our goals. I know that as a young man, even after we came to the ashram, I still had the need the internal need, psychological need, to prove to myself that I could succeed on a practical level. So I started a business, an incense and oils business, and ran that for about 4 or 5 years, and it was by far the biggest income source for the entire ashram. But after 4 or 5 years, and I was attached to making a success, but after 4 or 5 years, that need within me was fulfilled, and so I then essentially gave away the business because I had other things that I wanted to put my energy to. But our evolution is directional, and it's much better to be attached and achieve your goals than to be unattached and lazy. Swami Kriyananda said in terms of this directional development, everybody understands it intuitively. Imagine that you had a relative, a cousin, who was completely lazy and only laid on the couch and did nothing, expected others to take care of him, and said, I just can't do anything. And he wakes up one day and he says, you know what? I just had the inspiration. I'm going to go out and become a millionaire. Wouldn't everybody say, wonderful, wonderful, he's going to do that? But if Gandhi or Mother Teresa woke up one day and said, I'm going to go out and become a millionaire, wouldn't everybody say, oh no, they've fallen? And so it just is showing that there's a directional development to what we need to do. So become a success, even if you're attached to success. Get wealth, even if you're attached to that wealth. Because if you don't get it, you're going to think that your happiness will come if you do get it. But we know many very, very wealthy people, and they aren't attached to their wealth because they already found out that having a lot of money is not a source of happiness. But they had to achieve that in order to get it. So be attached if you need to be attached, but achieve your goals, and then you'll find that as soon as you achieve something, within a very short period of time, you're going to set another goal. And that'll continue and continue and continue until those goals that you set become internal goals. And you'll realize that your source of security doesn't lie outside yourself, it lies inside. But it doesn't come by not going through the stepping stones.
I'll answer briefly as well. In the Gita, it talks about nishkam karma, action without the desire for the fruit of action. And really the whole Gita, we're going to be having a weekend, next weekend at the Duke's Retreat in Kandala, and we're going to be talking about the Bhagavad Gita Master's interpretation. So we don't always talk about prosperity. But the whole Gita is Krishna's calling to Arjuna, you must act. This is your dharma. If you walk away from your dharma, you will not be a success in this world or in another world. And he, through this beautiful discourse, unique in all of spiritual literature, where it's a dialogue between God and the devotee, that it's the admonition, you must act and fulfill your dharma. Well, your dharma, perhaps, I don't know, but for all of us, there's some goals that we all have. And being spiritual doesn't mean you run away from your goals. It means you fulfill your goals with everything you've got, but then without attachment to the fruit. So there's the difference, the subtle difference. Give it everything you've got to accomplish your goals, and then say, I learned from that. I learned how to put out energy. One of the wonderful things we were students of Swami Kriyananda for many decades, And he had so many projects. And he would, you do this, and you sell these books, and you publish this, and you get this music out, and you do, and it wasn't, and he knew that it was by giving other people things to do where they would learn these principles that Jyotish was talking about, willpower and endurance and focus and concentration. That's how we grow spiritually. So the real benefit of success is not necessarily the end result, but it's the doing.
Oh, good. We have a lively group today, so we'll have good questions.
Pranam, my name is Shailesh Gupta. I needed to know, can we overcome our past life karma with manifestations?
Can you overcome past life karma with manifestation? Yes, absolutely you can. There's someone, oh, okay. But also there's someone over here. Yes, you know, past life karma is very interesting subject because much of what is there holding us back is karma from the past, but it isn't obvious to our consciousness. So it's subconscious patterns. And so the way to overcome past karma is to work on our habit patterns, because the individual acts, Yogananda put it this way, every thought sends out a pulse of energy. Thoughts are real just as electricity is real. Every thought, every feeling, every act we have sends out a pulse of energy. And that pulse of energy goes out, but it's the thought that created that is like a magnet that will pull back a similar one. And so if we are constantly having certain thoughts, call it failure thoughts, then those cluster together and they create a failure consciousness, and that results in habit patterns that make us fail, like lackadaisical energy, or refusal to put mental energy into something, or having a fear of failure, or shyness, or whatever it is, whatever those past things are. So how do we overcome that? We can't do anything about what was created in the past. That's going to come to us. But why is it going to come to us? In order to help us learn the lessons that we need to learn. So if we are learning the lessons of overcoming those negative habit patterns, yes, that karma is going to return, but we're no longer facing into it, we're moving away, and maybe it just comes and taps us on the shoulder. But if we haven't learned our lessons, and if we're repeating that same behavior, it's going to smack us in the face. So the way to overcome past karma is to learn proper behavior, proper patterns, and especially, as Devi was saying, more altruism, more connection with our own self. If we do that, then the past karma still has to come, but it won't affect us in the same way. Our guru's guru, Param Guru, said that the past of all men is dark with many shames, but the future will improve if you make the right spiritual effort now. And so we can, in fact, not necessarily nullify, although even that is possible through certain spiritual practices. We can burn up those seeds of karma that are within us. With that exercise I mentioned of filling the consciousness with light, filling the brain with light, Yogananda said that that will help burn up those seeds of past karma so that they can't germinate. So we can do that, but the main thing is to get the energy going in proper behavior and proper habits.
And I'll just add, one of the problems with understanding the law of karma or being familiar with it is we can take it as a fatalistic decree. Oh, it's my karma. Oh, what can I do about it? But again, our Guruji said, what you have done, you can undo. Meaning that if you have been selfish in the past, therefore you are in a state of need yourself, then you can do the counter activity and you can be unselfish to others. So look at patterns in your life that are limiting, whatever it might be: health, wealth, friends, lack of ability to be creative, and just say, okay, this is some pattern that was set up. I will do the opposite, equal and opposite. And little by little, you start realizing I am overcoming these patterns. And one of the great things about Yogananda's teachings is he, again, showed us the unlimited potential for self-transcendence, to overcome any limitation we have through the right effort. So, another question?
I'm going to just add one tiny thing here, that in every religion there is the same. In Christianity, it's called the Golden Rule: do unto others that which you want others to do unto you. In this case, give to others that which you want for yourself, and that will neutralize past karma, and it will create future positive karma. There's okay.
Okay.
Namaste. I am from Vrindavan, Mathura. My name is Jyotish. I want one question: how to develop language? How to develop achieve language? You know English. You speak English. I speak Hindi. So how to develop other language? How to learn the language by anyway?
Okay. Please repeat the question. I wasn't sure I understood.
So he's from Vrindavan.
Have you seen Ananda's work in Vrindavan? Yes. Okay, we have a beautiful charitable trust where we take in Vrindavan, where we take care of the widow mothers, and we are helping many thousands of widow mothers through this charitable organization in Vrindavan. So I'm glad you are familiar with it.
So his question is that he primarily speaks in Hindi,
Okay.
and you were talking in English. So he wants to understand how to learn other languages. Is there
Okay.
art and science in learning?
Okay, is that correct?
How to learn, how to develop language.
Okay. You know, when next year, 2020, Yogananda, it will be the 100th anniversary of Yogananda beginning his mission to the West. He was sent by the great masters to come to America to teach there and share the teachings of yoga. He arrived in Boston, September 1920. And when he came, he spoke very little English. There he was coming to start a big work in America. And on his way over on the ship, because most of the rest of the people on the ship were Westerners. Here he was in his orange robes with his long hair, and they asked him to give a talk in English on the science of religion. And Master talks about this in his autobiography of a yogi. You know, just for my own information, I couldn't see when Shurjo asked the question, how many of you are familiar or have read Autobiography of a Yogi? Okay, if you haven't read it, please treat yourself to that experience. But in Autobiography of a Yogi, he tells the story of, he was asked to give a lecture, and he just spoke very rudimentary English, but he lived everything that we have been speaking about, and he just got up there and he froze. He stood there for about 5 minutes, and he said, my mind could not wrap itself around the English language. And then he just called on God, he called on his guru, and he heard his guru's voice saying, you can do this, speak. And he gave us a lecture for an hour in English. Perfect. And afterwards, he didn't even remember what he had said. He asked what did I talk about? What did I talk about? But, so what we're talking about is super consciousness, the ability to transcend only the logical mind. When we travel around too, very often we'll be speaking to people who speak a language very different from our own, Russian or Italian or all the dialects in India. But you know, if you listen intuitively, not just with your mind, you can understand a little bit of what people are saying. So to develop language, don't just do it rationally with the logical mind. Try to do it from your heart and from the center of superconscious awareness. And you will be surprised how you can feel it's really about tuning into the consciousness of other people. Not so much the grammar or the vocabulary, but it's feeling other people's consciousness.
And I'll also give a practical answer. Not that what she said, super consciousness is more practical than the conscious method, but conscious method, you need to study a language and you need to use the language that you're studying. So our Italian waxes and wanes according to whether we're in Italy or not, because when we're in Italy we use it and all of that learning comes back to the fore. So study, feel that you're, try to look for opportunities to actually use the language you're studying, but then also draw on higher consciousness and intuition.
Hi, how to overcome laziness? Because you talk about willpower and focus. So I have a struggle in the morning. I get difficulty in sleeping and waking up in the morning to do sadhana every day is a struggle. So how do I wake up on sleep on time and overcome laziness?
Okay, basically how to develop a good habit pattern, especially about sadhana in the morning.
When willpower is difficult.
When willpower is difficult. Willpower is a chancy tool. It's like a muscle, and when your muscle is weak or atrophied, you can't lift very much. So you just need to start with a little bit. But I would say to develop a pattern of sadhana in the morning, be sure that you get up at the same time. We had, in the early years of Ananda, we had many dwellings that didn't have Ananda village in Northern California, in a very rural area. We had some dwellings that didn't have electricity. And so one of the monks there had trouble getting up in the morning. And so what he did was he had an alarm clock. When that alarm clock went off, he turned on a flashlight and rolled it across the floor. And then he was in a dilemma that if he didn't go and turn off that flashlight, it would run out of the batteries and he'd have to buy more batteries. So he was in conflict. His greed overcame his laziness. And he would get up and then he would go over and turn off that. And then once he was up, then he would get going. So if there's a reluctance to get energy going, find some way to do a little bit. But once energy is moving, then it's much easier to keep it moving. And then once you have a little bit of a habit, keep that habit and make it very secure. So you can meditate for 5 minutes in the morning, but it's best to do it at the same time every morning. That will develop that, and then you can expand on that. But there are many, many techniques of developing positive habits. But again, you have to do it. You can't just think about it.
So we'll take one more question from someone who hasn't asked yet. There's a hand up. Okay.
Hi, thank you for your time and for sharing the knowledge with us. So I have a question. It's regarding the universe. So does universe reciprocates to your thoughts? So you were talking about the flow of positive energy, that you need to train your mind to have a positive thinking. So does universe reciprocates to your thoughts? And if yes, then we have millions of thoughts in a day, and so we can't check every thought that it is negative, it is positive. So we gotta waste a lot of time in checking your own thoughts. So how do I train my mind so that I can have a positive flow of a thought, so that the universe reciprocates to me in a positive or in the wrong way of thoughts I do.
Did you all hear the question?
Yes.
We'll just repeat it, I think, for the recording. So he said, first, does the universe reciprocate our thoughts? And then, if this is true, which implied that it is, then how do we keep our thoughts positive when we have so many thoughts throughout the day? Well, the universe is definitely reciprocal. There's only, in a way you can say there's only one thing happening, and that's the universal consciousness of which we are all a part. And according to the quality of our thoughts, of our actions, we draw exactly that back. We had a friend who told a story. He was boarding an airplane, and he knew his luggage was over the weight limit, and he had a lot of things. And the man in front of him, who was checking in at the counter, he also had, his luggage was overweight, and the clerk behind the counter, they were arguing, no, you have to pay an extra fee, and they got more and more angry, and finally the man just stormed away. He said, I'm never going to fly this airline again. And then it was our friend's turn to go up, and he had more weight than the other man did. But he just said, I just put out positive thoughts, like he was my friend. And the man looked at his luggage and he said, oh, I think this will be all right, just push it through. And the universe reciprocated. And you see this with children, with animals, with birds, with flowers. The universe will speak to you if you know how. There's a beautiful quote from a great botanist from America. His name was George Washington Carver. He said, everything in the world will speak to you if you love it enough. And so how do you keep our thoughts positive? No, we can't just fight every little battle. Oh, I was impatient here. Oh, I got angry here. But we can awaken a flow of positive energy that changes the quality of our thoughts. Yogananda said, and this is very important, he said, thoughts are not individually but universally rooted. We draw the thoughts according to our level of consciousness. Through meditation and right action, we raise the level of our consciousness. So we don't have to fight every single little thought, but automatically our thoughts become more positive through the practice of meditation. And studies prove this. And so rather than worrying about, oh, I made this mistake, I made that mistake, you forget all those things. Just say, I am on and my consciousness is moving towards a higher expression of myself. And then the battles become quite easy.
Another thing that can be very helpful is self-analysis. And Yogananda recommended it quite strongly. So you can't monitor every thought every day. But at night, get calm and look back at the day, and if you do that for a while, you'll begin to see certain patterns that you have, certain negative patterns that repeat themselves over and over again. Maybe you allow yourself to get frustrated and angry as soon as anyone challenges you. Well, in the moment, you're not going to stop that behavior. But if at night you look back and you say, every time I'm challenged, I get angry. That's not helping me. It's not helping the situation. So then once you understand a repetitive problem or a repetitive consciousness, then you can begin to work on that consciousness specifically. So with getting angry, maybe you bring in breathing techniques. So as soon as you're challenged, instead of immediately responding, you take 3 deep breaths, because that will open up a space between reaction, but that space will open up so that you can choose action instead of reaction. So this is just one example, but we said earlier what you need to do to overcome something is put out equal and opposite or equal and stronger energy to the problem that you're trying to overcome. And so self-analysis will allow you to see where the repetitive patterns are that are giving you trouble and giving others trouble. And then you can take one at a time and work at that. One of Yogananda's disciples said that we are not responsible for the first thought that pops into our mind, but we are responsible for the thoughts that follow that. So learn how to control your reactive process, which also meditation is the best tool for that. Reactions come from lower brainstem areas, and by bringing the energy to the fore part of the brain, we can actually learn to be able to control our behavior and our reactions. But self-analysis, countering with equal and opposite energy that which you want to change, and being aware that you're trying to do it so that it just doesn't run on automatic all the time. Those can all be helpful in creating a positive flow of thinking and behavior within us.
So I think we will conclude now. We want to thank you all for being with us this morning. You have just been very receptive and attentive, and it's been a joy.